welcome to the Queermonge Institute, our Q&A Conversation for Exploration series. I'm Paul Robert, the Executive Director and President of the Institute, and along with my wife, Laura Lee, the Director of Research, Education, and Outreach. And on behalf of our Board of Directors, our advisors, volunteers, and supporting members, we want to thank you for joining us today. The Queermonge Institute is an independent, nonprofit research organization committed to researching consciousness and the human experience, following the footsteps of our founder, anthropologist, Dr. Felicitas Goodman. And our focus is reflected in three main areas: experience, education, and exploration. We respect the path of academic balance, the creative pursuit of science, while advancing, conserving, and restoring a direct experience of the deeper human connection to all of life. It's part of our mission to expand our own experiential research with the multidisciplinary understanding that's available to us today. So as an educational institution, we take an open approach, and we invite scholars in related fields to help broaden the scope of our own work and exploration, and that's why we call this Conversation for Exploration. And on these weekly Sunday discussions, we've had a full spectrum of topics, from the arts to the sciences and everything in between. You're welcome to visit our website at queermongeinstitute.com. All of these presentations are free. And as a nonprofit, of course, we invite you to become a supporting member, join our circle. And we thank you, the community members who continue to support the mission of the Queermonge Institute. As an extension of the research at the core of this institute, from an anthropological perspective, there's a direct connection revealing that the further we go back into history, we see that spirituality and religions of the ancients have their roots in the ancient goddess-centered tradition. There's so much more that we can learn from the goddess mythology that still needs to be embraced today. There continues to be a reemergence of the feminine. And we have to ask ourselves, what role do we have to contribute to a world where the feminine spirit is honored and where all women's rights and contributions to society are valued and necessary for the evolution of humanity? And as an institute with a core message that change happens from the inner journey of direct experience, we can't fully engage with the goddess wisdom by only reading and talking about it. It's at the core of a highly experiential experience. The path to awakening experiences the divine feminine through our bodies. This is a practice of embodiment, embracing all the gifts of the feminine in a dynamic, interactive, incorporating the expression of dance and movement and trance induction methods and ritual. And the role of us as men. Well, let's empower that feminine, the dreams of the spirit, the transformative power, because it resides within all of us. This is a key piece of the resetting we need to undertake today to usher into a new story that brings us forward to the eternal wisdom of the past.
And what's not to love about a man who realizes all of that and expresses it so beautifully? It is part of the big reset. We talk a lot about that, this new story for humanity, that we're all called to participate and write, to point the way for us going forward, and about being responsible members of the web of life and engaging with it, honoring all of life as sacred. And we found a few practical steps towards that. And one is developing a personal relationship with the stars, the moon, Mother Earth, the planet we call home, and with the divine energies, the goddesses of old, and with the ancestors. We talk a lot about writing and resetting that relationship within ourselves and our family and our communities and with the world at large. And I find that developing these relationships with the unseen energies to make it personal and direct and dynamic is a big part of that. And so the goddesses and their archetypes, when our guest, as you mentioned, Chad Hamill, needed to postpone, I really was at work writing about these relationships with women, learning from other women in my life. And that's when Leslie Zehr, one of our guests today, sent us an email, an invitation to talk at her event coming up, an online event. And I thought, well, oh, how perfect, Leslie. And thank you. Make this a guest. And I was just at work with, by way of introduction of Leslie and Keren, our guest today, I wanted to mention I was just at work on a blog where I was writing and appreciating my women friends. And I just want to share a few thoughts on that to put all this into context. I was just finding that all of my women friends are expressing within themselves various goddesses in their archetypes or the ancestral lineage of the medicine women of old, this lineage that runs through all of the women around me. It's there to find within each of us, and each of them carrying on some aspect of this long tradition, so that now every woman I meet and have a conversation with, I'm watching for what might be in her metaphorical medicine pouch hung on her belt, or what digging stick is she carrying, so that she is unearthing something that illuminates her life, the light of which she is shining on mine. What fresh insights on life and living can we share with one another? The women in my life have helped me find comfort and joy by reframing some of the daily tasks of life. A big reset for me was the kitchen. Not necessarily a fun place for me growing up, with a mom who resented being there and had to rush through cooking, determined to beat it into submission, and yet who consistently produced beautiful and perfectly balanced meals, and clearly what was an act of love. Or my sister Kim, a gourmet cook who decided to make her time in the kitchen fun and welcoming, turning on her favorite jazz and blues, taking her time, dancing her way along, all the while with her laptop on the kitchen counter so she could still work while stirring a pot or two. A complete reframing of the kitchen. So I learned from my sister how to make time there a welcoming center, inviting everyone to sit around and join in the fun atmosphere she created. I met another Kim recently, a vibrant neighbor who puts the gusto into everything that she tackles. This Kim had just completed her chef training, vegan chef training, and she handed me her 4-inch thick book of Spices of the World, this vegetarian flavor Bible. And I thought, oh, here's the continuation of the medicine women of old who worked with spices and herbs and secret botanicals and powders. And while those ingredients may be devoted to the culinary, it's truly the modern woman's medicine bag that she's employing in her work. And I know I will never be the chefs that these two Kims are. I will never, as my sister does, read cookbooks as novels. But I can find my own sense of the sacred in the kitchen. And so as I load up my Instant Pot, a very popular now new tool in the kitchen, with the day's vegetables for soup, and add those superfood potions and spices and herbs to it, I have christened my kitchen as the alchemical lab. It can be my pot as the test tube, heating up for the transformation of ingredients that I know will soon be taken up by our blood and our bones. That is alchemy. I can bless the technology that makes cooking nowadays easy and efficient. I can press a button and walk away. These newfangled tools and contraptions, as my mother would call them, with which to practice what women have always done around the hearth and the home: nourish and comfort and restore body and soul. This is just one aspect of women's business, and I find it much more uplifting and rewarding when I can draw upon the long lineage of women who've always been at this same work of empowering ourselves and those around us. And I think that when we do that, we give men a platform to practice their sacred roles in life as well. So to learn and to support one another, we have to find our own way with this nowadays, because certainly our society isn't exactly handing us the manual for this anymore. And what it has handed us, we find a very few important pages are missing. And that is why we need the learning centers springing up widely today for women's empowerment, women's wisdom, and why we've invited two women here today as our guests, who both coach women on this very thing, empowerment, on finding one's unique gifts and how to share them widely with the world. We're all called up to step up and to help steer the ship nowadays. And that too is a sacred quest to find what gifts we have. I think of them all as on loan from the Creator, with the obligation to find how we best can use them for the greater good. And so, as we continue our journey of learning from one another and inspiring one another, let me introduce first Leslie Zehr, a longtime, go clicker on, a longtime member of our community, and so inspired by the Egyptian culture and goddesses that she makes her home in Cairo. As a sacred arts teacher, a workshop leader, mentor, and author, she has spent 30 years supporting women in reconnecting to the divine feminine within through the mysteries of ancient Egypt. And her two books are The Alchemy of Dance, Sacred Dance as a Path to the Universal Dancer, and The Alchemica Remedies, Vibrational Essences from Egyptian Flowers and Sacred Sites. She teaches at an online school she founded, Universal Dance Temple of the Sacred Arts, and she hosts the Universal Dancer podcast, where we've been among her many guests. Hello and welcome, Leslie.
Hello, thank you. Thank you for inviting me to be here. This is exciting.
And you have brought a co-conspirator, Keren Brown, with you. Hello, Keren. Keren is a certified professional coach and facilitator of Dr. Christine Page's Women's Mysteries for the Modern Woman. How's that for bringing the ancient up to the forward to the present? She's a movement facilitator and a marketing consultant for creative entrepreneurs. She supports women through the challenges and transitions of the second half of life. She calls menopause a really big initiation. And she brings more joy, vitality, and ease through embodying the wise woman archetype and embracing feminine wisdom practices. With wisewomanleading.com, her online school. Welcome, Keren. Good to have you here. She joins us from Toronto. Leslie, do you want to say anything else by way of introducing Keren?
Well, I'm not even sure how we met. It was a long time ago, but Keren and I do a lot of projects together and we seem to be very synchronized. So especially this year, we've done a lot of things together. So we definitely are flowing down the same stream. And it's really nice to have somebody to work with and collaborate with, because I do think that that's something that we as women do really well, is to create community. So it's really nice to have somebody like-minded to be able to do projects with and have support with these projects, and to just collaboration for me, I guess, is really important. So it's been a beautiful journey together.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, it's been, I think originally, Leslie, you introduced us to the authentic dance. I couldn't remember the specific title, but your approach to the movement of the body and how that all is it is the technique. It is the way for us to flow, to reconnect to something deeper and more profound within ourselves, just by allowing that transition through the body itself.
So from one embodiment tradition to this embodiment tradition, we found great resonance immediately. Yeah.
Yes.
So
and I've always found the trance postures. One reason I joined you was because the modality that I teach is movement. So it was very curious to me to see something that also would take you to that deeper state that wasn't movement, that was meant to be fixed.
Yeah.
And still in the body. Yeah.
Yes. And even in the choreography that I do, I often get like specific postures, which I'm sure there's a bigger story too. But I during the revolution here in 2011, and I think that I connected with you right after that, I just had this piece of choreography that downloaded, and it had all these kind of postures in it. And I thought, those are significant. I don't know what they are, but I know that they're significant. And that's kind of when I started pursuing what those things might be. And then when I found your institute and Dr. Goodman's work, I thought, okay, this is, This is the place I need to look for the answer to that. Yeah.
These are great.
Yeah.
And lo and behold, you're surrounded in Egypt by statues of gods and
Yes.
goddesses in various postures.
Yeah.
Yes.
So there you go. And I appreciate also the embodiment of your work, Keren, where our own bodies through the stages of life take us through these internal mysteries and initiations.
Initiations, yeah.
Do you want to talk to that just briefly and how you found your way to what you do?
Yeah. So I've always been interested in mythology. In fact, oddly, as I was born in England, and I guess they do things a little differently than they do here in Canada. And so we started school a little earlier. And one of the first things I remember learning is Roman mythology.
Oh, yeah.
And so, and I didn't connect the dots until many, many years later, of course, but one of the stories that fascinated me the most was the Persephone story. I can't even remember now what the Roman name, but I remember one of the first things I asked my parents for was to buy me a book, and it had a list of all of the goddesses and their conversions of their names from the Roman to the Greek. And I was fascinated, kind of put it aside, and then realized in my 30s that I had basically in my late teens and early 20s lived the myth of Persephone and had been taken into the underworld. It was in an early first marriage, and it was kind of a textbook classic case, and I figured this out somehow through my own kind of combination of reading and internal inquiry, and probably in my 30s. And then really started to get fascinated with all of this. And it became a deep dive into the women's mysteries by the time I was in my 40s. And then I guess starting in the kind of the perimenopausal years in my late 40s, starting to understand and find, I found Christine Page, Dr. Christine Page, who is a beautiful teacher of the women's mysteries. And she's done a lot of research into the history as well, can speak really well on that. And she created a program. And so I got myself involved in that. I've taken lots of things with her, but her overarching message, and now mine, I guess, as well, and Leslie's, I'm sure, would agree, is that as women who are connected to, we're deeply connected in an embodied way to the mysteries through the goddess and through the worship of the goddess. And so we have within us, in a way that men don't biologically have the same function. We bleed, we experience the moon time, and every cycle of those 29 days in every lunation, we actually have an opportunity to die to the old and be reborn. And so we carry within our body this practice. We weren't taught that in the Western world, but if we can actually come back to that, and there's a way that we can practice that even after, and I support women, mostly in the second half of life after menopause, we can return to the lunar cycle, we can do ritual, we can work with those cycles of the moon, to remember again and again and again that we have this ability. And that allows
the moon herself goes from nothing to fullness.
Exactly. Yes.
In what, 28 days? I mean, that's an extraordinary and fast cycle. I've always been interested in how women of old in those eras, say ancient Egypt here, how they celebrated and honored the goddess. What did it mean to them? These different goddesses and their archetypes and what they represented. How do you embrace that and make it meaningful in your life? Because these goddesses meant something so pivotal, so central to those cultures. And then how can we do that if it was so important to them then, and their psyche and their fulfillment and their expression and their anchoring in life and culture? How can we do that today? And I find that such a natural process when given permission, when given access. It's just something that lives within us.
Well,
and why not?
It's the living
Why not
embodiment.
today?
It's the living embodiment.
Yeah. I mean, we can learn about the goddesses academically, but why not embrace it and make it part of our lives? And it's so fulfilling to do so. And it helps us recognize the divine in one another. It helps us recognize those gifts and those powers and those potencies in one another. So I just want to invite everyone to join in. And I appreciate how Goodman found it. Let's take a statue and do it as she does and add ritual and sound to it. And boy, does it bring the goddess presence. Boy, does it bring wisdom forward. So I appreciate how you each found your own way to this. So, yeah.
And
Thank
I
you.
think that's what mythology was all about. It was the
Yeah.
teaching stories. These archetypes teach us. But Karen was talking about Persephone. Here within our community, we started doing the descent of the goddess. This is a big part of the work that I do. I work mainly with Hathor, but Hathor is actually part of the serpent goddess, and the serpent goddess is very, very ancient. And the caduceus is what represents the serpent goddess. So there are two aspects of the serpent goddess. And if you look back in mythology, you always see that there are these two aspects of the feminine. There's Inanna and Ereshkigal. There's Hathor and Sekhmet. There's always these two opposing forces, and the goal is to integrate these two forces.
Rather like testosterone and estrogen, right? Your hormones are balanced to do a dance.
Yes, and we can find that. And I think that, again, when we talk about mythology, and as I've said, my main guidance comes from Hathor, but again, we cannot neglect Sekhmet. But if you look at Hathor, ancient Egypt, the history, if we're just looking at ancient Egypt, the history is so long. So we have at least 31,000 years, probably more than that. And I don't think that now as Westerners, we can even imagine that. I mean, if we think back to sort of year one, which was 2023 years ago, that's a huge period of time. Think about how much change there's been. Well, Egyptian history is half as much again. And that's only what we know about. We're talking about the unification of Upper and Lower Egypt, 3114 or whatever BC, around that period of time. Now, we believe that the history is much, much older than that, but let's just imagine that that's what we're working with. Things really changed. And as we went through these ages, we know that when we get to the age of Aries, that's kind of when patriarchy comes in. So the energy that I'm working with Hathor is a very ancient goddess. And she was the main goddess back in 31,000 BC. As we get closer and as we move into the age of Aries, then Isis comes up. Isis and Osiris come up, and they were much more human-like. So the mythology begins to change. So I think it's important to look at this mythology.
Yeah.
But we also have to look at different aspects of it and to see how it did change and kind of morph and started to tell a different story. Even though Hathor may have a story that's fairly regular, still, if you look at different periods of time, that's going to change. So what really attracted me was the really ancient history.
Yeah.
And that's why, for me, Hathor is the goddess that I'm looking at, and not Isis. Isis is something that kind of came later and was more part of the patriarchy. It has more of a hierarchy. But she was the goddess of love and empowerment. And her temple, Dendara, is dedicated to women. It's dedicated to the feminine qualities. The word Hathor, which is actually the Greek, Heteru was the ancient Pharaonic, means house of Horus, which means the womb. So her entire her temple is devoted to this birthing. Now, it's not just physical birthing, it's also spiritual birthing, right. But it's facilitated by the feminine. The feminine is this bridge between the gods or the other dimension, whatever you want to call it, and and the human realm.
And
So,
that's so eternal, isn't it?
yes,
We've been talking about the Gravedian globalization, so that even in the Ice Age, there are obvious art and symbols and postures and mythic characters. And Goodman was finding a connection between a Lascaux figure and Osiris in Egypt,
yes.
a direct connection. And so it's something that we've carried forward. We don't lose the mythology. It might get morphed. It might get subterranean repository for a while, but it's there. It's running through, and it has different incarnations, names, and eras. But indeed, we can go back, push it way, way, way back, and see the connection.
Well, and we don't even need to go back. This concept of the serpent goddess, it keeps coming up, like now with ayahuasca. Many people say that during an ayahuasca ceremony, they encounter the serpent goddess. And honestly, I believe the serpent goddess is DNA. There are two strands and they're interwoven.
Right.
So I think what we're really connecting to is our DNA. And that's the story. That's what's trying to come across, which to me is interesting because my background is actually in science. At university, I studied psychology and biochemistry. And I have no idea why I studied biochemistry. I wanted to understand how the body worked, and that's not what biochemistry is. Basically, in biochemistry, you're studying the cells, and mainly you're studying the mitochondria of the cells, which now I understand. This is our lineage.
Yeah.
Yes, but it's only in recent times when people started to talk about mitochondrial DNA that we start to understand this is the lineage, like this is the feminine coming through our whole history.
Isn't it interesting that the whole ancestry of the universe, right, and its evolutionary wisdom built this into us, as you were saying, Keren? It's just right there in the unfolding of our biology, all this wisdom. It's like, to make sense of it and to survive it, we must turn to the deep wisdom that's held within it. And we can express it mythologically. That myth lives within us. It springs from us. That's encoded in our DNA as well, I should think, how we express it in the psyche and what it needs. So I see the linkage between your two work. So beautifully.
I'd love to add something about the serpent from some of the teaching that I've been involved with. There's also an idea, well, we know, of course, the serpent now in the Christian world, in the more modern world, is connected with the idea of sin and so on. And it's been sort of, relegated to something perhaps in the realm of evil, and dragons as well. There's that idea of the maiden having to call upon a man to slay the dragon, and there's a connection between the dragon and the serpent. Wow. And one of the ideas that Christine Page put forth from her research, she looked at Demetra George's Mysteries of the Dark Moon. She researched looked at a lot of the archaeological and anthropological research that's out there, and she was noticing, or she believes, that the dragon energy is what lives in the grids, in the ley lines under the earth. And that as women, what's happened, how when we talk about Kundalini in the modern, that idea that it kind of goes from the base chakra here. And what we're missing is the connection deep into the earth. And so we need to reconnect to the dragon or serpent energy in the ground. And so part of the embodiment ritual that we do during the dark moon is to actually draw up that energy. We send our roots down, connecting to that dragon or serpent energy, and bring that up in through the base. So we're really connecting from the Great Mother up. And so it's believed that might be the missing link.
I think our ancestors knew that, because they framed the serpent as the ability to go down into the ground and come up again, to shed its skin. So that symbology of life, death, and rebirth is just built into its life cycle. So and the cycles. So yeah, lovely. It's interesting the disempowerment of women that has taken place in Western society over the centuries, and doing so mythically, so that a sacred symbol as the serpent now gets demonized through that story.
To continue.
So that's why it's so important to understand the story and what it's really telling us, and how stories morph, as you point out, Leslie, through time to reflect the needs of a certain culture as it transitions, and why the resetting, the retelling of a new story is so needed today, and how we're all called forth to participate in that. And women especially, we need to redefine our roles, redefine our purpose, redefine our power and what we do.
I
We're
mean,
just so needed.
and I have to say, even in my lifetime, it's still somewhat frustrating,
Yeah.
the battle or the fight or the energy that it has to go into for the feminine to be recognized. It's still to this day, there's like a reversion. It goes backwards instead of going forward. And it's like a pendulum, but it's hard to get it on the front of discussion in a powerful and new embraced way that it has its own voice, because then it gets distracted.
Every forward
And then
step, we have a step backwards.
and then they
right?
make it into a political discussion about being feminine or not being feminine. And it's like, let's come back to the core elements of what it is that women bring to humanity, and how that element needs to be recognized and brought forth. And because it's the healing that we need. We don't have any other choice. The way that the path we've gone in humanity is not working.
Testosterone run amok.
Yeah, there has to, we've got to find that balance. And I'm not just talking, it's yeah. So you can tell I feel animated and interested in this discussion, but I'm also frustrated at why are we still having this discussion? We did this talk show, we did a radio program in the 1990s, same discussion. It's like, now, can we please embrace the idea of the power of the feminine in a new and powerful way? And it doesn't have to be a debate. It is, right? I mean, it is a phenomenon that we recognize. We're not stupid, but why are we not embracing and learning? Because we continue to go after the mechanics and after all these other ways of solving the political and also the environmental and all these different aspects. But we keep leaving the feminine out of the discussion. And when I say we, I mean as not us,
A society.
but as a society, it's still a battle to bring the feminine into the discussion. So that's what I hope we can at least touch on today to help move this thing forward in a new and powerful way. Yeah.
I think part of the problem is that we're using language in and of itself that language in and of itself is very masculine. The book, The Alphabet versus the Goddess.
Right.
As soon as we got to language and written word, we already shifted our perspective. So in my opinion, it's not that the feminine is heard in words, but the feminine is felt.
Yeah.
And on this subtle level. And this is something that especially Western women are not aware of. Women in the East are. In Egypt, like the bad eye is a big thing here. Women know their power here, their innate power, and you feel it. It doesn't necessarily have to be spoken. So I think this whole thing of making everything external is you're kind of, barking up the wrong tree in a certain respect. Like part of the feminine is the unseen. We want to investigate those inner landscapes. We want to investigate that empowerment. To me, masculine is power. It's power over, but empowerment is the power that comes through you, that just exists, that just is. Like you think about a mother, she just is. Her presence there is empowering. Now the problem is, again, in the West, we're going through this masculine lens of wanting to have things in order, wanting to give people rights, for example. And that all has to do with language and has to do with putting things in boxes or making hierarchies. So I think you're already sort of defeating the point when you get into that. And now how you solve this problem, I don't know. I'm just very aware. And again, living in a different culture.
Right.
Egypt is unique in that it is patriarchal, but it's also matriarchal. Like the women rule the family. And there is just no question about that. And that's very powerful. Women have this power just in, for example, their ability to birth children.
Yeah,
You're
we're the
alone with
portals.
that child for 9 months. You're the main influence on that child. So it is up to you. And I'm speaking to mothers, it is up to you. It's how we teach our children. And unfortunately, well, I do think, you know, not to get into conspiracy theories, but I do think that that was planned to take women out of the home so that the children, as we know now, everybody's traumatized. And a big part of that has to do with children not feeling safe and things like that. Now, as all this trauma work comes up. But I think that, yeah, we need to kind of go back to that and stop looking at everything through the masculine. And as women, and I think that that's what Keren and I are trying to do. We're trying to do programs about women for women, because empowerment is about finding it within yourself. Forget about what everybody else is saying and what they're going to let you do and not do. You just find your way and you do it. And I think that's what the feminine is about.
And building
It's not
community among women to encourage and inspire one another
Yes.
to do that
yes.
and to share that wisdom. By the
But it
way,
takes-
not every woman needs to be a mother. I am not.
No,
So I just want to say that that's a valid option in life too.
Yeah.
So
Absolutely.
birth something else. Let something else come
absolutely.
through you.
No, and I honestly believe if you don't want to be a mother, you really shouldn't. Like that's not something
Yeah, I
that
came to
I
that
am.
conclusion. Yeah.
That's
Early
not, so
on.
I'm not saying all women should have children, but we all have the ability to birth, and we
Birth.
all have that within us.
Well, and also
that
our
is a
center
posture.
place,
Yeah.
posture, and our center place is hearth and home as well. We need to make that a sacred space, no matter where
Yes.
you.
And for me, I would have hoped that the pandemic would have shown people that. I mean, that's what I was hoping, like from lockdown, that people would see how important this sacred space really is. And, you know, and that inner space. And I think it did to a certain extent. There were a lot of people who like don't want to go back to work and don't want to go out to the world. And so it did show people something. But I do think that was actually a positive step, a glimpse behind the curtain, sort of, as to
I saw it as Mother Earth saying,
potentials.
children, go to your rooms and think about what you've been doing. You've been bad.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Rethink
It was a chance.
And
I don't think, but I'm a little bit disappointed in that as well, that I thought that time of going back into our homes and being isolated, almost like a meditation,
I don't want to bitch here, though.
Retreat.
I want to
No,
get onto the
but-
positive.
No, I understand, but that was an opportunity, and it had its impact. And I think it's something that we continue to learn from, hopefully, and that we don't forget what we did learn
Tend your inner
during that
garden.
time.
Yeah.
During that time.
I want to
Yes.
see another means of disempowering women, Keren, has been to, oh, you're old, let's go put you on the sidelines and just go sit there and we'll
Well-
drug you so you don't say anything and you're easy to care for.
Well-
Can we talk about re-empowering women for all of their lives? Because that's what you're specializing in.
Yeah, that's definitely a topic that excites me. I think, and it comes back to this whole, the goddess again. You know, if you go back and look at the statues, these were women who were, you know, round and they had all the curves. They were, juicy women. And many of them are depicted as the crone, right? And this is something in Western culture, and I think it's changing a little bit to some degree. I mean, we do have kind of the celebrity, you know, revering of celebrity, but we also now have some role models, women who are older. But generally, you know, again, it's just part of what's been forgotten. It needs to be remembered, is that in the older cultures, women were revered as the elders, and they still are in indigenous cultures, but we've lost a lot of that. So part of my work is
Shortchanged. Yes.
Yeah. It's helping women, you know, remember that they're actually coming into their power at menopause, not going out of it. You know, the external world may say something different. The message is, well, you know, you may not be the top choice for this job because you're older. But the truth is, we have the experience, we still have within us, the triple goddess teaches this. We still have the virgin, the woman that creates. We still have the mother, the nurturer, and we have the crone, the wise woman. And to me, the wise woman at midlife is kind of dancing with all of those pieces and integrating all of the parts of ourselves as well, light and dark and all of that. And we can still use the lunar cycle, for example, as a way to, so each phase of the lunar cycle is aligned with one of those aspects of the triple goddess. This is something that Demetra George taught. And so from the time of the, when the crescent moon at the new moon and up until when you get to the full moon, that's the time of the virgin. That's the time when you birth your new creative seeds. And then at the full moon, they become fertilized. And then at the time of the waning moon, that's when we take stock, we look at what needs to go, what we need to release, and then we head into the mystery of the dark moon. And that's the time when we die to the old and we really go into the world of the unseen. And so every month after you stop bleeding in menopause, you can align to the lunar cycle as the ancients did. Their moon time was, women didn't have artificial light to worry about, and they would go into the red tent. You've heard stories about the red tent. They would go in, and it was a time to commune with each other, to rest, to nurture themselves, and then they would come out, with the new seeds, the new spark. So as women in the second half of life, it's a big practice that I, teach my clients, is to actually every month to do this work. And every month we're looking at, what are the parts of myself that I met? What are the pearls of wisdom? How can I fill my cup with my accomplishments? Not from an ego place, but I do things that matter. I've got creative seeds I'm planting. And then we keep cycling, and we gain wisdom and power every month that we do that.
Well, even biochemically, they say that when we sleep, so we're there in the dark night and we're unconscious, and that we dive that deep nightly, that is when the brain is reprocessing and making sense of the day. What do I keep? What do I toss in terms of memories? Let's reset our biochemistry. Let's recharge for the day ahead. So that process is built into us as well.
It is. There's all of these different cycles. There's the cycle of the day. There's the cycle of the lunar cycle. Then there's the season that we're in life. There's even, you can even think of the breath. Every single breath is this same process of life.
Metabolites,
death. And when you exhale, if you pause on that exhale, that's your dark moon time. That's you in the mystery in that moment.
Beautifully said.
From the macro to the micro, we're in ritual and these processes. It's interesting, the festivals of ancient Egypt, Leslie, and how even as a society they understood this and programmed these kind of community-wide festivals in their place. Do you want to speak to that for a moment?
Yes. Again, I think that you have to see that these practices and mythologies and things went over a long period of time, and they did change. So I think there were practices, rituals that happened every year. Even they went into the months, and they were calendar people.
Well, even really, the Sekhmet festival, right? The beer festival. Sekhmet,
yes, and there's also
humanity has misbehaved, and now she's going to drink red beer to represent the blood, and everybody gets to be revelous and crazy for a moment, and then get that out of their
system. To embody that energy. To embody the energy of that. And Hathor had a festival where Horus the Elder, they were a couple. So they had in Dendara temple, they had a statue of the goddess, and then in Idfu, yes, Idfu, they had this statue of Horus the Elder. And during one part of the year, they would float the statue down the river to Dendara. And there was the Chapel of the Union where they put these two energies together. And then in another time of year, they floated Hathor up the river to Idfu to have this, again, this sacred marriage. And so there were a lot of festivals, but I think the point of these festivals is to embody that archetype, to tap in, which I suppose they weren't called gods and goddesses. They were called Neter or Neteru. And if you look at the word, so hieroglyphs, obviously it has pictures, but these pictures actually are only consonants. There are no vowels in the ancient language. And so the consonants would be NTR. And if you look at that, Neteru, Neteret, NTR basically is nature in every language almost. You just put the vowels in different places. So they weren't gods and goddesses. They were archetypes. They were aspects of nature. And that's what people were doing, was trying to worship. I still think is the wrong word, to embody, to connect with, to understand, to use those energies. Again, vibrational archetypes are vibrating energies, and we can connect into them. So by connecting to these different Neteru or Neteret, you could embody whatever that energy was. And so I do think that these different ceremonies were a time to focus on whatever that particular energy was. And I'm sure that it was all very calculated, because they were great scientists and magicians, and all of this was one thing. It was not separated. So they were integrating all those different things. They were great astronomers, as we know, all the ancients were. And
their
I have
cosmology ran through it as a piece. So their medicine and their festivals and their astronomy and their this, that, and the other, everything just was part of the same cosmology. I want to really say that this also goes back to our Ice Age ancestors. I remember in Paris at one of the museums looking at etching on a bone of 3 horses, the foal, the mature horse, the older horse, and then the skull of a horse. And so even they were noting the different phases of life and the progression of life. And now they say that if you want to decode Ice Age art, all those cues about which stage of life, which season the animal depicted is in. Is it pregnant? Is it nursing? Is it what stage of life was meaningful, to the point where it was a language, where their mythologies there were tied to these stages of life. So that observation runs through us, through the core, to honor those stages, to make it part of the language. Yeah.
People thought of things in cycles.
Yes.
Our thinking now is very linear. And still, like, we still want to say that new is better. I think if we just look back to the ancients, again, that was Iliade's work, the eternal return, the gods, the ancestors that came back to earth, that came to earth. If we just keep repeating that, if we keep invoking those energies, those archetypes, we can go through that natural progression of that cycle in a perfect way. And to me, that's what they meant by gods and goddesses. The Neteru was, they meant the perfect archetype, the archetype in its purest form. Hathor is this archetype in the purest form. And this is what we aspire to. If we want to invoke that kind of energy, this is what we can aspire to. Not that we want to be a god or goddess or anything like that, but we have these examples. And I do think that this is a problem in modern times. I mean, to me, as a woman, it's very disturbing to see. And again, this is happening here. Western culture is moving to Egypt, so things are really changing. But and it isn't the same. Like the whole thing about the crone, women they want to be the head of the family. They want to be the matriarch. So it's a little, the perspective is a little bit different, but it is beginning to change. And I think that, as I was saying, the sad thing for me is that young women don't want to be women. I mean, there are so many young people, and and I think it was the same even in my, when I was like a teenager, that we don't want to be women. Like, we don't aspire to being women. And I think that's because we don't understand what that is. We
Hmm.
don't understand what
Excuse me,
power we really do have.
Can I butt in here? I'd
Sure.
like you to elaborate on what you mean by that present day women don't want to be women.
Hi,
Well,
Ann.
that's a huge discussion.
It might be.
You brought it up.
But yeah, when you
Yeah.
talk to young women, like, they don't, a lot of them are, going into the process of changing their sexes. And it's a huge problem. And I really think if you talk to young women, if you can have a real conversation with them, that they don't see the advantage to being a woman. They don't really
Is
embrace
that
that.
society's fault, though, of constricting our roles over time? Yeah.
I think it's a lack of understanding what it really means. A lack of understanding of how you can embrace that feminine nature. If we're taught that being assertive is what we want to be, then if we're very feeling, then there's no place for us. So I think that a lot of it is this sort of exalting masculine or yang. Let's call them yang, because I think that's more less
Neutral.
charged.
Yeah.
These yang aspects. And so then young women will aspire to those. Well, there's all these yin aspects. Why can't we aspire to those? Because our biology, our hormones, all of us take us down that path. So we can use that. We don't have these other hormones. And I think that's the level that we should be
Oh, we do
looking
have
at.
those other hormones. And I think that when you try to be assertive as a woman, you're often called a bitch and you're shamed for it. So I think society does constrict us into certain, let's be polite, let's be, yeah.
Yeah,
This
but I
is
Good
think,
little
truth
girls.
be
Anne brings
told,
up-
it's not that
Yeah.
easy for us to do. Like, for me, I'll speak about myself. I can be assertive. But when and I see this in Egypt because people are very assertive. Women are very assertive here. I don't have that in me. It takes all of my soul to come out, for me to really to assert myself. It's not something that I prefer to understand what's going on, to communicate in different ways. So for me personally, it's not something that comes naturally. Do I want to aspire to that? I'm not sure.
I think that you have a very binary view. And I think that one of the advances that Western culture is recognizing is that we are all a mixture to
agree.
varying degrees of different genders. And I think also that asserting that somebody has a particular binary gender based on their external genitalia that some delivery person assigns them at birth is sort of the end all and be all, is really a misrepresentation of the current science that's available. I think that the real challenge is figuring out how some of the important aspects of femininity that you are describing can be integrated into current day life. And I do agree with you about that.
Yeah.
I don't want to have to, as a physician and an endocrinologist, I don't want to have to wear a gray suit and a bow tie to go to work and have my voice heard when I sit at a table of people making decisions. I don't want to have to do that. And I think in current Western society, we are still being pushed to that. I think I belong
agree.
in the workplace.
Mhm.
I think I belong to have a seat at the table.
Yep.
I think I should be getting paid the same amount of money as somebody of some other gender and sex is getting. I think there should be equal pay for equal work. I really take great exception to your sort of implying that that negates my femininity.
Well, that's not what I meant. And again, I think that the views that you're expressing are very Western views. And there's nothing wrong with that. I'm not saying that. But what I'm trying to say is that in different cultures, different rules apply. What you're saying maybe doesn't apply to the culture that I'm living in. So what I'm saying is we all have to do the best we can, but I also think we can also learn from other cultures. We can learn from indigenous culture. We can learn from the ways that other people are living. This is the culture I'm living in, and I'm trying to express what I see from the world around me, that we do have other options. Maybe you don't have other options. Like maybe in the culture that you live in, you're working from the options that you do have and making the best life that you can based on that. And I think that's what we all have to do. But I
feel
also think that
my options include seriously 40 plus years of commitment as a healer in Western culture. And as part of that commitment to healing and alleviating suffering, I have provided significant numbers of people with gender affirming hormones.
Mhm.
And so you saying that, gee, it's really bad to give people testosterone, I don't know how many transgender
I didn't
people,
say that.
you implied that. Forgive me if I misinterpret.
No, I didn't say that. No.
Can I say, Anne, we would love to have you on a Sunday and really dive into this. The
Mhm.
endocrine system, the transgender, the all of that issues. You have a lot to say on this and you're an expert on it. So would you like to join us on a Sunday? Because I think this is a topic that for the healing
I think
needs to be explored. And I support people who need to experiment with that and find safety and comfort in their own body and its expression. I'm with you there.
There's an
So would you like to do
education,
that?
there's an education happening. There's a shift happening.
Yeah.
This concept of gender identity and all that's happening in the world
Oh,
politically,
it's up today and it needs to be
it's
explored
happening so
fully.
dramatically, so quickly. For us of a different generation who didn't, we need to learn, we need to
wanna
educate,
learn.
we need to be
We
integrated,
want to
we
learn
need
and
to understand what
support
that all means.
and be
But
educated.
there's
because
also, I also want to honor both perspectives of what's being
Yeah.
said here. I do see the value. I know, like the philosopher Matthew Fox talks about how the divine masculine has to be incorporated as well. That there's a balance of chemistry. And when you say divine masculine, it may not be a male with a penis. It may just be whatever that is, along with the divine feminine. And he's talking about the fact
Yeah.
is that it has to be an equal.
It's a dance.
A
right?
dance that's
Takes
going
two.
on for all of us to meet
Yeah.
that goal that Leslie's talking about, that we need to find a way to integrate as a society, as a civilization, these concepts
Come
in a way.
together and
Yeah.
accept all of us wherever we are.
Right.
We've also talked about the twin spirits. We've had an anthropology student come and talk about the twin souls,
Oh.
where you inhabit both male and
the two
female
spirit
within
concept
one.
within the
The
native
two
traditions.
spirits.
Yeah,
Not
right.
twin souls, two spirits.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of education we need to have.
Thank
So
you,
you were
Anne.
invited in. You decide what to do. You're invited in.
Thank
We
you
hear
for challenging. It's okay. We love to be challenged in the conversations. It
So,
keeps it vibrant.
Thank you. But
Yeah.
it deserves its own couple of hours
Yeah,
to
yeah.
go into
Yeah,
this. Appreciate
Thank you,
that.
Anne.
So,
And Karen, you didn't get a chance to speak much, so Karen, go ahead.
and thank you, Leslie, for your perspective.
Yeah.
I was just thinking about how, in a way, this kind of highlights a bigger discussion around something that, I think we're all really frustrated with right now in the world in so many different ways, and it's showing itself in different ways. And I think it's actually germane to what we're talking about. This idea that, we've all become so polarized.
Mhm.
We've kind of lost nuance
Mhm.
And this is something that, yeah, I'm fascinated by this. As a person that's always been like a seeker of truth, you know, in all things, capital T and small t. I find it really interesting because there is paradox in the world. There is nuance, and we seem to have just kind of lost that somewhere
Going
along
to
the
black and
way.
white and lost
Yeah,
shades of
we've
gray.
lost the both and, you know, and I feel like this kind of archetype of the wise woman is about being able to see we're walking between worlds, right? We're able to try on different perspectives, look at different possibilities, different potentials, and integrate all of it, you know, into with reverence for, you know, reverence for all. I think
Yeah,
that's the
accept
piece.
all of us and where we're at and
Mhm.
find the bridges between us.
Yeah, and reverence, you know, that what Paul was saying earlier about this period of time, you know, starting in March 2020, there was that really kind of magical beginning where it was like, oh, this is an opportunity for us all to kind of come, you know, into an inner space to remember and look what was happening. You know, they were saying, oh, the natural world is kind of righting itself with everybody's inside and all of that. And that was a great time because we remembered reverence. And then suddenly things kind of shifted, and it felt like it was more about there were some corporate agendas, and you know, there was a bunch of power stuff happening, and we really got then entrenched again in kind of a very external masculine, hyper masculine, not divine masculine. Let's focus again on external authority. It's like back when in the day when we originally put, you know, the bearded man, white man in the sky and separated ourselves from our inner knowing. And so I think really the opportunity here and how this all ties together is it's to come into our own discernment with reverence for ourselves and others. What, you know, and recognizing the wholeness and the nuance. What's right for what feels true, what feels right, how can I act in a way that comes from a place of reverence?
And also find our journey. What is our medicine? And
Yeah.
Leslie, your medicine is embracing those feminine qualities. And another person's medicine is something else, but it's all available to us. And I guess that even in the challenges of today, the great challenges of today, we have everything at our fingertips to find our way, right? And to find who we need to learn from, and that changes and that evolves. So I think there's a blessing for it all, the smorgasbord being all here for us to wend our way forward through.
And I'm referring back to the work of Dr. Goodman, the founder of this institute. I mean, there's a shift in consciousness at the foundation of the transition
Yeah.
and the evolution of society as we go along. There takes that inner journey, that dance within that's happening. And so this balance and for some of the discussions are on the table today, politically and in the mainstream news, is that we're trying to find our way to finding that balance between the feminine and the masculine, and within each individual's personal life and their how they identify themselves, but also as a society as we move forward. It's a shakeup, it's a shift, it's a challenge. It's not
Well,
smooth.
one aspect I really appreciate about the goddess is that I find acceptance, total unconditional love and acceptance of who I am, right? And what I'm going through and all the wounds and all the
Yeah.
you know, that is a beautiful aspect of the
Right.
mother goddess, to
So-
love unconditionally her children.
But so
So-
my point being is that I think that we have to allow for that evolution that's happening within us. And as you point out, Leslie, there's a worldwide tradition that's separate from what we perceive as Westerners in this conversation that we're having. And you know, as Westerners, we have a certain mindset of everything. And the Western thing needs to incorporate the traditions of the indigenous world, and vice versa. There's a balance and a dance going on there as well, as we have a chance for us to evolve, because ultimately coming back to
Well,
the
and in the
origin.
indigenous world, honoring even the two genders in one person was a thing. It
Right.
was done. It was
Right.
honored. You
Right.
were special. You have direct access to the mysteries, right?
Yeah.
So
Okay. Yeah. So
And
anyway, go
I
ahead.
think Karen made the important point that it's about discernment.
Mhm.
And I think that this was something that the ancients, I'm putting two things together here. The ancients
Okay.
had that what we were talking about before, like this direct experience with that archetype, because I
Mm.
think part of the problem is, and it's not just in Western cultures, now it's everywhere, especially because of social media and things like this, is that nobody's thinking for themselves. They're being told something, and then, it's everything is like a meme. You're told something, and then, oh yes, that's what I believe, or this is what you see on the news, and then that's what my belief is. You have your own path. You need to find your own way, and you need to find your own truth. So I think a big part of it is going inside. What do I really think? What do I really feel? And for me, this is where this whole aspect of embodiment comes in. I
Mhm.
think we were detached from our bodies because our bodies hold the truth. There is a way. If you test somebody with kinesiology, you can know if they're lying. Like your body is like a lie detector. There is truth, and it has a specific vibration, but nobody's honing those skills. Nobody's going in and finding out what their truth is or what they really think about it. And that's why I'm bringing up these subjects, which may, may not resonate with everybody, but think about it.
When you say
Don't just
nobody, there's
throw it away and say, no, that's not the way it is. Think about it. Sit with yourself. What do I really feel about this? This concept of, we're all everything, and we're both masculine and feminine. Okay, but think about that. Don't just say that. Think about it. And what does it mean to you? Do you really believe that? Do you really feel that? I do feel I have a masculine side, but I'm very connected to my feminine side. I think for me personally, my feminine side is much greater, and that's where I find my power. So yeah, I have a masculine side, but so many people just throw that, well, I have a masculine and feminine side. Yeah, you do. But what does that mean to you individually as a person? And how are you going to use that? And how are you going to tap into that?
I guess you make a good point, is that now we have the chance to have a global conversation, to be connected with just about the whole cacophony of conversation and issues in the world. But at the same time, then there's going to be agendas that want to try to lead us or push us or manipulate us. So we need to be very much aware of our own journey. You need to unplug for that. You need to spend some time in deep meditation or spiritual
Or
practices,
dance.
or
Yeah.
just be, what we
Yes.
are missing is that relationship between us and the all and the spirits
Exactly.
and the goddess. We need
And
to
to
have that
know
direct
what truth feels like.
experience, which is why we think
Yes.
our work is so important. To have
Exactly.
that direct dialogue with the
Right.
eternal, with the wisdom, with the
Yes.
whole evolutionary cycle of the universe. So I think
And that's what
that's
this
in
whole
addition. We've got many
that's what this whole
responsibilities.
event that Karen and I are creating
Yeah, tell us
is
about it.
for people to
Mhm.
hone those skills, to realize that there are different ways. There's dance, there's the trance postures, there are infinite ways, dreams, whatever it
Yeah.
is, to connect to that higher self, the non-material world, your guides, whatever you want to call them, to find that wisdom and to find that truth. And it isn't the same for everybody. That's
Yes.
something else that I think people believe there is one truth, and there isn't. It's different for everybody. And I think it's important for you to know what your truth is, what your path is, and to walk that, and to champion those things that you find important. And yeah,
And
I
speak them
think
out.
that's
I don't want to
what we're
be
doing.
shamed that the divine feminine doesn't exist. I want to read Maria Gemburas and say to the archaeologists, the goddess has been honored through time immemorial, and we can still do this today. And Maria was onto something important, and I just want to say that. So I'm not going to be shamed out of the divine, make it
No.
forbidden turf. No, I'm sorry. I have access to that. It's an important part of my being,
It's
along
a
with many
huge
other
part.
things.
It's a
Yeah.
huge way to, it's that,
Yeah.
that part of our history is longer than what we've been living in the recent past.
That's an
So
important point.
they,
Yeah.
yeah, and they got
Anchored
it
in that.
right on some level, you know.
Mhm.
I find, and again, this is a time thing. When I was going to university in the United States, which was in the 80s, so this may have changed completely.
No, I'm sure
I'm
it has.
speaking from
Yeah.
that perspective, but I remember that's when they started to have women's studies courses.
Mhm.
And none of the women's studies courses were ever like Maria Jimbuta's work with the goddess cultures. Like, if we're going to talk about women's studies, talk about the time when
Mhm.
women were revered and
Yeah.
exalted,
Mhm.
and not just the time when they weren't. So
Yeah.
there's got to be some kind of balance. We need to bring all
Well,
of that together.
in ancient Egypt, women did have good rights. Women were honored. Women did have a role. So there, you're saying that this,
Absolutely. And the
they found good
king would
balance.
not rule without the blessing of the goddess, because he knew that that's where his power came from. It came to him through the goddess. So he was not foolish enough to think that he had this skill or what he needed, that connection. So I think, yeah, the whole idea and aspects and the belief about what the divine feminine was very different.
I just also, since we're kind of on a bitch fest here, I just want to say about what are the ills of society and what do we want to correct? Okay, I just have some pet peeves, and I've expressed them before. But one is, who are the voices in popular culture that we're listening to, that we're paying money to download their stuff? And I'm talking about singers, right? The music. I think that one of our best exports in America is music. But I look and see at some of the lyrics and some of the stories that are being told in modern lyrics, and I'm like appalled. Why is this so popular? And one of them, I have one female and one male example. And the female example is Taylor Swift. And she's always bitching about her boyfriends and her ex-boyfriends and shaming them through song and calling them out. You weren't, I'm like, get on to a different story. Get on to some story of empowerment and
Right.
true, something worth listening to. Come on. You're
You're
so
gonna get some
popular,
hate
you
mail 'cause
have a
everybody
forum.
loves Taylor
Okay,
Swift.
fine. But tell me a different story, and then I might listen to you. The other one was, I don't know his name, you know his name, but we turn on the TV and we see a concert from a guy that has, beautiful women in beautiful costumes strutting up and down and beautiful lighting. And I thought, oh, this is interesting. But then I couldn't even understand the words. But here's the closed caption. It's all about abuse, sexual abuse of women, blah, 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 how much you need women to supply your sexual gratification. I'm like, oh my God, what happened to the Me Too movement? Where could we demand a little respect in this sexual exchange between us? Hello, could we be honored in that? Could we come to the table, with all of our dignity intact with sexuality? Can we reset that story? So you have the Me Too movement on one, and then this kind of stuff. I'm like, I don't get it. Could you, that is so last century. Could you please, popular icons of the music scene, could you please tell us the new story and be advocates of this in the healing of us all in our relationships? Hello, I don't get it. So I just want to say, who are we listening to? Who are we signing up for to say, yes, I agree with the story you're telling me? Can we look even at that, of what's being supported? And
that's
it's not my generation supporting this, it's the younger generation, but wake up, people. And, I'm sorry, but that's such an old story. Let's get on with the new story and start dialoguing on that.
I have to add to my own wife on this one, but sociologically speaking, what people are buying because there's something within us still that's searching and trying to
Exactly.
understand. And so the reason why it's so popular and why these people have millions of listeners and things following is because there's that search within the soul, that spirit. It's not the artist's problem. It's our problem.
It's like, who are we supporting? What
Yeah,
story are we
Yeah,
supporting?
yeah. So, I
Yeah.
mean,
But that's what the masses are supporting. And I think that that's very telling, and that we need
Yeah.
to look at that, yeah, these people are so popular. And I think that also is a problem of modern culture, in that the ancients had they had the Neteru, they had these archetypes, these sort of perfection that were aspects of nature. They were meant to be perfect. Now we have celebrities and we call them stars, but they're not.
Mm.
They're human beings.
Yeah.
And
We've always
and they
associated
are
our
fallible. Yeah,
our
and
heroes with
they're
the
just
stars.
human beings. So when somebody comes along and says, "Oh, so and so, and we should all hate him because he did I don't know what," he's a human being. Like, why did you put him on a pedestal to begin with?
yeah.
So I think that this is a problem in perspective, in that at one point in time, what we were idolizing was something perfect, and it was meant to be perfect, and maybe we could never attain that. But now we've lost that completely, and we're still idolizing, but now we're idolizing these human beings who are flawed, and some of them very flawed, because to get to that position is not easy. So, that in and of
I
itself
think
could be a
the
problem.
Roman gods and goddesses were a little bit imperfect. You've got Jupiter raping women all over the place. I'm sorry, but
Well,
unless that
I'm
was
going
just,
back further,
like,
which doesn't
oh,
mean
you're
that they were
light, shine
perfect.
upon me, I'll do anything for it. I don't know. So
Yeah, but
Can I throw
again,
my-
groupies, the gods had their
Yeah, go
groupies,
ahead.
but go ahead.
Just thought I'd throw my 2 cents
Please.
worth about the music thing. I have, as the mother of an 18-year-old Taylor Swift fan, I think all of those stories, everything, music is about resonance, right? And frequency. Sound is a healing tool or not, right? Depending. And because I've been exposed to a lot of music through my daughter, like the current music, there's a big, broad spectrum.
Range. Yes.
I think, Taylor Swift is a brilliant songwriter. She's
Agreed.
prolific, and I think each one of those songs, it's a moment in time in her life. She writes about her experience to express it. And I think that's a great thing. I encourage women of all ages all the time to find what's your creative expression and put it out in the world. And at the same time, I do hear there's a lot of indie girl, sort of late teens, early 20s that are putting out music right now that it's a lot about anxiety, and I think it's important to bring, mental health and trauma to the experience. And also, my daughter actually said that. She said, "That's really good music and I resonate with it." And also, though, isn't it also true that we're kind of reinforcing that message on some level, and staying at that frequency? And I'm like, wow, that's quite insightful that you could say that. So it's a both and, and I think there are many brilliant musicians out there. Maybe they're not as popular, but they are doing beautiful work to try to raise the vibration with higher messages and all of that. So again, I think it's just coming back to the discernment for each of us. What resonates with me? Where do I want to be?
Mm-hmm.
What kind of music will support my healing and my growth? And just kind of make choices. We each make choices for what feels true for us.
Well, and we generally try to navigate our way in these conversations away from current day politics, because it's never a winning conversation to go there. Like, leave that aside. We love the fact that you want to look back into the ancient traditions, the indigenous cultures, looking for understanding and seeing what nuggets of wisdom that we can pull forward into our own lives and have some kind of an effect. Because that's been part of what we work with here at this institute, is just that understanding that the human story is so filled with nuggets of wisdom that we somehow have misplaced and lost. And we want to go back and say, we don't know it all. What we have in this generation, we think we're the pinnacle of human civilization. not true.
Well, let's
Human-
not cancel our past either.
Let's
Let's bring
not
it
cancel our
forward.
past, but it's not, yeah, exactly. And so
Mhm.
how can we integrate that?
Bring
And
the
that,
best forward.
that's the
Yeah.
power of your message today, I think, is that, you know, Leslie, whether it's taking people through that the wisdom of sacred dance and having that direct experience of the power that comes from within, and how that can have a transition in our lives, and how we can have an effect. And you know, as a male who, prior to today's world, but looking back, you know, we had many conclaves at the Institute. We had men's conclaves, where men would come together and have deep ritual experiences
And you
together.
had a transgender individual
Sure,
there,
yeah,
one
yeah,
of them.
let me finish.
So
But
open
the
and-
point being is that within that context, what we found was a sacredness. We found a power, something that was protective, that was so aligned with the divine feminine, something that was so important to have, that it wasn't the rah-rah, beat a drum and dance around a fire naked. Like like it's sort of the idea that most people have when you say men's movement and men's conclave. I think we didn't do any of that. We did
Yeah,
direct experience of going deep within ourselves, and we demanded that sensitivity be represented in all of that we did, and because
And the sacred role you talked about of protecting
Men-
the tribe, women and children. Let's protect them.
and men have, you know, been given the burden of somehow always suppressing emotion. So for a man to be able to cry, to want to protect his family, for a man to want to be able to participate with that aspect of himself that
nurturing.
somehow has been put off to the side, you know, it's an opportunity for us to go to another whole level of experience. So today's discussion about that, the divine feminine, about the goddess, about that energy, it does go hand in hand. And I think that there's such an opportunity for us not to get distracted and to say, okay, good, we're digging deep here. Let's go further with this. And I call upon those of us that identify as male to be looking to the divine feminine for research and understanding and experience, for us to grow in new ways and new powerful ways. And like that, though, I'd like to challenge those in the divine feminine movement to look for the divine masculine, because it's there. It's probably not represented in current day culture very much. It's not very readily accessible, but it's there at the foundation of us in the human story. So that's the integration. I think that,
Let's be our best selves, come together and dance.
yeah.
Right.
And I know
And-
Leslie only has about 25
Well, I
minutes
would also
left,
take
so-
comments from the audience because I'm
Okay,
seeing
well-
some interesting stuff in the chat.
Well, Kelly has got her hand up first. So Kelly, you want to go first, and then we're going to go on to please raise your hands, and I'm not going to read the whole chat room. So just go ahead and raise your hands and share your comments now. Okay. And give Kelly a second to log on here.
Yeah, can you see me?
Yes, we see you.
Okay. So I think that I took what Leslie said in a completely different way. Just because I am 42 and I run a lot of artifact pages and I help with them, and there's a lot of men involved. And it's just funny, like this is what popped in my head when she started talking about this. Was my hair used to be really long, and I went to get my hair cut last week. My sister does it, and I was like, just shave my head. And she's like,
Oh,
why would
please
you
no.
say that? Why would you say that? Why would you say that? And I'm like, just shave my head. Like, just do it. It's hair. It'll grow back. You know, it's no big deal. And she's like, well, why are you saying this? Why are you feeling like this? Like something has triggered this. And I have been triggered in the last like few months because I felt like I was not being heard or respected as in the same manner as some of the men that were showing artifacts. And it was almost hard for me to tell if they were actually talking to me because they wanted to talk to me about what was in my brain or other reasons.
Yeah.
And so for quite some time I had changed like my profile picture like to like a rock face, you know, but I shouldn't have to do that. So
Right.
what she said I just took in a different manner because I understood what she was saying. Like, why does it have to be that way? You know? And there's a ton of great men in these groups, don't get me wrong, but there are some that you just, you know, a shooter's gonna shoot.
Yeah.
You know, like if you know, and I just never know anymore, like who is really coming for artifact questions, art questions to talk with me in my brain, or who are they coming for?
Mhm.
Right.
And so sometimes I get a little bit discouraged. Like I just want to be seen for more than
Mhm.
like on the outside,
Mhm.
because I'm so much more, and I just feel like unseen sometimes.
Yeah.
And that part of the artifact world. And I'm also a musician. There's a lot of men. There's just a lot of men in sports and everything that I'm interested in. And the Taylor Swift thing, that did get me though, because
Sorry.
one thing that bothers me about that is the men in her business, like a lot of the businessmen are the ones that, made her write these songs. Hey, this one sold really good. Like, you got to write another one. Who was your next ex-boyfriend? So it wasn't always the entertainer, who was still just a person too. And it wasn't always her idea to write these songs about,
Yeah.
these guys. Like,
Just
give them
the
so much
public
energy.
Shaming should be done in private. And if you want to change your relationships, change yourself. Right. Grow up
Right.
is my
Yeah.
attitude. But
Right, but I just think a
But
lot
it's
of
a
the men that
business,
grew,
too.
a lot of the men that are in charge of what she does, like, she always didn't have control over it. She had to fight for
No.
that. And so
They-
now
they
she
want
is
what
actually
sells.
writing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
She's writing her own albums finally, but
Yeah,
she
so-
wasn't before.
Right.
Oh, okay.
And
Thank
that-
you for that.
Yeah. She's
So
a very
appreciate-
mild reference point. I mean, the other person you're referring to, the weekend who was talking about
Yeah.
just abuse of women, that's a different kind of journey
Yeah.
and expression. But yeah, absolutely.
Well, I
that sells
appreciate this
too.
talk very much. I'm very intrigued, but with both of you and the gods and goddesses, and thank you.
Well, Kelly, you
Yeah.
brought it. Yeah, thank you very
Thank you.
much too. Thank
And
you.
they have an online event coming up that they're going to talk about that offers a lot of avenues.
That discussion. Yeah.
Yeah.
And-
Okay,
You know,
great.
and the invisible, I love that title, The Invisible, because it's there on both sides of the fence, the invisible. That's a realm that we all need to truck in. Watch out, there will be dark nights of the soul in all of that work, that deep work. Be prepared, but it's so rewarding, and it's such an interesting journey. So many avenues. It's like the creator goes, many avenues to come and explore these realms.
Yeah.
You will come here sooner or later. Might as well make it sooner and illuminate your journey earlier on.
Yeah.
So I applaud
But
you
it takes
both.
courage.
Yeah, it does.
It
Yeah.
takes courage to be on a spiritual path and to question things. And so, I applaud anybody that does. And I think that's why we need community and other people who can support us on that journey, because
Yeah.
it's not easy.
And it's not a solo journey. It truly is a journey. It's your solo journey in the setting of the community. Share notes along the way. Yeah.
And some of you that made
Yes.
comments in the chat room, see, there's Bianca, Sharon Rose, anyone who feels.
Oh, yeah, I wanna hear what you have to
Let's
say.
get some comments going as well. So I don't catch you by surprise by putting your mic on, but join in the conversation, because
And I'm thankful for the whole gender issue to come forward, because it has been hidden for so long. People have been suffering for so long. It needs to come up and be discussed. So
Well, and I think we have to realize that there is no black and white. We have varying opinions, and my opinions are based on my life experience, the culture I'm living in, and
Right.
it isn't Western culture. So I'm sure that many people have different opinions than I do, but I'm here to support people who want to explore something else.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
It's also interesting when we look at the goddess archetypes, how much they have been adopted by men with laying swords down in honor of the goddess, or seeking the boons of the goddess, to say, I may die. This is how I interpret it. I may die in the battle that I must do to protect my community, or to go to war because I'm assigned that role. But I look to you, goddess, for rebirth. I
Hmm.
look to you to continue. And to forgive and to sanction. So it's interesting how important to the men in their sacred role that they turn to the goddess.
The male.
That we need to help each other there as well, across that divide.
Yes.
Mhm.
We're there for each other. We have a marriage because we watch each other's back. We're there for each other, right? And I think that's true in society, we need to have each other's back and support each other.
I mean,
wherever we
the true, like you're talking about,
Yeah.
that true role of the
Yeah.
masculine is a protector. That means you can be an environmentalist. You can protect your family. You can protect the water. You can protect the
Mother Earth.
You can protect all that's around you.
Mm-hmm.
That's a role that you hold dear to your heart. You should be fighting for. You should be. That's what a warrior is that element of protector. So
To fight for hearth and home.
Mhm.
And
Well, and I think we need to acknowledge that the divine masculine has also been put down. That role of
yes.
being the
Oh.
protector has been taken away from men and put in the hands of a police force or whatever. So men are also not being
Confused.
allowed to step into their divine masculine. So
That's
I
right.
think that, yes, as we talk about the divine feminine, we have to talk about the divine masculine and realize that it isn't just the feminine that has been ignored, but also these other roles.
One
Yeah.
story I remember hearing or reading somewhere, don't remember where now, was that in some of these ancient cultures where that was more not matriarchal, but where there was more balance, was that the men, there was a time when it was necessary for men to go to war, but they would seek counsel from the women, and the women would go inward and discern, is this the right thing to do? And in this story that I read, they also were the ones that would then say, it's time to stop now, and the men would stop. But the men had the physicality to be able to fight the war in a way that
Exactly.
perhaps the women didn't. So there, that's kind of an interesting, demonstration of that idea that Paul was saying, of the men as the protector, but it's with the alliance of the feminine and the inward knowing of what was appropriate and for how long. Yeah.
I remember reading how elephant herds now, because their tusks are being poached and the bulls get killed, or the matriarchs get killed, and the bigger bulls, bigger tusks, and so they're the targets. And how without the matriarchal mother elephants guiding the herd, they all run amok. And the young bull elephants don't know how to behave, and they don't know what to do. They're not being guided and nurtured and contained by the matriarchs, who sadly are missing. So it's interesting. I see that as an analogy of our culture. We've taken away the matriarchal wisdom that would guide and protect and nurture and constrain some of the male rogue elements in our society. So we so vitally need both sets of wisdom in that. And we can look at early societies, that women's business, men's business, they had their councils between them, where they co-equally shared in the guidance of the society. So
Each bringing their gifts to the table, and that's
Exactly.
how you
different
come
but equal.
together.
Yeah, when we traveled to Australia and we went to Uluru and we walked around the sacred space, there's places that are set aside, women's business, where they do their ceremonies and
Caves.
rituals in caves. And then there's the men's business. Men don't need to know the women's business, and the women don't know the men's, in terms of how they conduct themselves in their society structure. And I think there's a power to allow that depth of experience to happen, and then to bring it back to the community. And again, I know in current day world and politics, when you start talking men and women, there's got to be that opportunity for there to
It's
be
a
a flow.
healthy debate going on.
But yeah,
And we'll
but
sort ourselves
yeah,
out.
so but there's a lot to
Yeah.
be learned from that, I think, as well. Sharon Rose.
Oh yes,
was-
Sharon always has something beautiful to say.
Well, Sharon, we had talked to Sharon about coming on later on with the presentation about powerful women in history that have made changes, maybe the lack of recognition, because the males always are the ones that are put at the top of the ladder. But some of the greatest findings in scientific discoveries have come from females, from women. And so we're going to
Who
have
aren't
that.
always given their full due.
Yeah.
Not often, but not always.
Let's see, Sharon, you available? I'm going to put you right here if I can fire this up. There you are.
Hey, Sharon.
Hi, I don't want to take up too much time. I'm really keen to hear about upcoming events that
Okay.
might be happening. And being a fellow Canadian,
Yeah.
really keen to see what's going on in the neighborhood. especially after 2 years of lockdown and the draconian Canadian experience of that. So this is very exciting today, and I appreciate all of it. And I had my I don't know if anybody would have noticed, but I had my resident young woman, my household as well, drifting through, who certainly shares some of these concerns with the expression of femininity, and she puts her all in there. So I have great faith in the future, given some of the young women I'm meeting and their commitment. And she also has a commitment to the arts, and actually she has a job in a gallery, as does my son, working with young artists. So I think the grassroots work moves apace, and the rediscovery of that work in the past. And so the rediscovery of Goddess is discovering that as well. We never really lose her. And since she was in most of time in most places, there isn't really a missing, there's mostly just a longing.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
And that
And a
appreciation.
reconnecting. Yes.
Mhm. Yeah, a way of being. And so
But she's in there. You just have to find her.
Yes. Remember.
Allow her to come out.
Exactly.
yeah, and sometimes not so far. The interest that I had, just speaking quickly to the technology interest and the repetition of some of these other issues, is the durability of women's artifacts tends to be more fragile, that we tend to work with objects and in a time frame that don't endure in the same way in archaeology and in other pursuits. So
Good point.
just
Yeah.
thinking of handcraft, weaving, pottery, and the interpretation of these things, there is a little bit of that durability that comes up. And that's often the way it is with women in technology in particular. We don't manifest objects that endure in the same way, although that's not always true. And our durability as people, as artifacts in ourselves and our artistic expression can endure. It's hard to read. And this is why raising Maria Gimbutas's work alongside of Felicitas's work is really important, because the work of female scholarship, even if it isn't necessarily what we call feminist or whatever, always will produce some of like a fractal. It would always produce a version of that fingerprint that we can add together. So I'm just being the voice of hope today.
Beautiful.
And I'm off to my study group this afternoon, where we're looking at women's ways of knowing for the next year and embracing. So these cells, these interworkings don't go away either. And so,
Wow.
we're there. I am interested when it comes to the ways of working in the world and how to recognize our sisterhood, because profession, and it came up earlier in terms of being a healer or being whatever, our professional worlds are often a dance that is even more intricate. So I'm quite curious about the types of networking that we end up doing with this fingerprint in mind, how to really recognize communication tools that we have that we don't realize we have. So how you two met and how these networks occur and so forth. I'm kind of curious how to take that type of skill forward without necessarily drowning out the subtleties and the intricacies and the authenticity that we want to maintain.
Mhm.
And I always have a curiosity about that. The Institute's one of those places, but as we go through the world, set our radar for noticing one another and staying current without
Exactly.
getting too disembodied with it all.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Open the radar.
And I think you said it, your radar, like
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
the piece, is that we have this intuition, we have this pull, listen to it. We've been told for so long not to, that it has to be logical and there has to be a reason. And no, I shouldn't go down that path, because if I weigh all the options, that's not the best one. But it is the best one, because you're being pulled.
Mhm.
And that's that resonance and that vibration of truth. So I think that's key. I'm sure that's how Keren and I found each other. And in fact, this event that we're just about to do, it was like we were both thinking about the same thing at the same time. And then Keren emailed me and said, I think we should do it was for the 11/11, it was an event. And I was just thinking about that, and she picked up on that. And I would say the last 3 things that we did together were like that. And then when we come together, we have the same thoughts. So I think that's how we find them. But you have to listen to that. You have to listen to that inner voice. And we've been told for so long not to. And I'm here to remind you that you should, and that these are the things that happen. And that's the same thing, like my coming to Egypt. Why did I? but it was the goddess calling me back. I see that in retrospect, but I listened and I was determined and I did it. And I didn't know why I did it, but I knew what that feeling was. So I think that's the point, is to know what the feeling of truth is and then follow that.
So
And
even on our
again,
radar, we can ask the universe to come in and help us write our
yes.
story as we
Connect
go.
our,
Help
Yeah.
us steer our own ship. The universe has
and
a larger
I
hand in
always
that.
write things down. Like if I have an idea that I think I should do something, I put it on the calendar or I write it down and then I
Honor
leave
it.
it till the next day.
Mhm.
And the universe will tell me why I should not do that if I shouldn't do it.
Right.
But I think you have to challenge the universe. You have to say, this is the direction I'm going. If that's not the right direction, then please send
Give
me
me a sign.
something.
Speak
Give
up.
me a
Yeah.
sign.
But to be clear, I mean, that's the problem. First of all, I think we forget to ask.
Mhm.
And secondly, then we forget to listen.
Because we really, we're doing an exploration of the unseen world, but where we're coming from with it is that we really feel that we are all at a choice point right now. And that choice is around, do we want to go in the direction, we're at an evolutionary tipping point. So do we want to go in the direction of expanding and becoming more divine humans? Or perhaps do we want to take a different route where external power continues to run rampant, the ego, the hypermasculine, technology takes over, we kind of become, less human and more, and there's great things about technology, but it can also have a shadow side. And do we want that, or do we want to remember who we really, really, really are? And so that future humans work that I mentioned is a lot about that. But we think the way in is the way in, right? The way forward is the way in. So deepening our connection and learning to trust our intuition and exploring the different aspects of the unseen world that we've maybe not explored before. And then going deeper with it and doing more practice and ultimately integrating that and remembering. So that's our little piece of, we're laying down our piece of the puzzle, what we feel called to do right now. And it's great to be doing it together and
What are the
bringing
dates and then how to get there?
Yeah, so we actually have a beautiful woman, Indigenous woman from Hawaii, Kahulahela Johnson, is going to start us off on April 23rd, which is a Sunday, with an opening ceremony just to set a container for us, call in spirit guides, do a Hawaiian oli, a chant and a blessing. And then we run the week of the 24th, April 24th, and then she will also do a closing ceremony for us on the Saturday, the 29th, which is International Dance Day. We might want to have a think about how we might incorporate
What we're
dance.
going to do. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, very
Yeah.
good.
Well, I know you're on a tight schedule, so I want to make sure we have a time for proper closing of the conversation. Sharon, thank you
Thank
so
you
much.
for your really astute comments.
yeah.
And I just want to say, you and your husband are looking at acknowledging women scientists and their contributions. And we're going to have that talk with you at some point.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because
Perfect.
we want to celebrate all the women that are making these important contributions. And I just want to say that I've been going around acknowledging all the wise women in my life and just telling them why I appreciate them and what they mean to me. And I think that's a wonderful thing to do, to just acknowledge those in our life. Also the wise men, if you're one of them, but just the people in our lives that we find so much resonance and strength and inspiration from. Acknowledge and to acknowledge the knowledge they hold. I may never do what they do, I never will, but I want to acknowledge and the few tidbits that I can learn from them that I can apply in my life, because there's wisdom everywhere around us.
Mentorship.
And it took me like I appreciate, Anne, that you said I was not born to the kitchen. I was not either.
No.
I came kicking and screaming, to find it, like make peace with the kitchen, for example. It's something you have to do every day, feed yourself and your partner. But I just want to say
vice
that
versa.
we can find peace in the areas of our life that we've never felt comfortable in. And the wise women in my life have helped me feel comfortable. The goddesses that on the invisible realm have helped me feel comfortable in all areas of my life. I draw from the seen, the manifest in my life and the unseen. I draw from that on a regular basis and populate my life with a larger community of goddesses, spirits, ancestors, the whole ecosystem of life. I draw from that on a regular basis. I can activate that in my life. I can engage it. So I would recommend that as well. To build your community out to encompass the whole universe. A really fun thing to do. I appreciate what you're doing. I appreciate you named your event, Let's Make Friends with the Invisible, in these ways. I applaud what you're doing. So thank you. Do you want to, Leslie, you've got only a few minutes, so you go first. And I know you have to go to another event, and then we'll spend a few more minutes with you, Keren. So final words for today.
I think it's make your own choices and
Explore.
yes, and invoke those energies. Read mythology. There's a lot of wisdom there, and like I said, I think we can invoke that kind of energy and just explore it. I think that's what, especially things you don't agree with, explore them. How could it be true? When I bring groups to Egypt, obviously there are a lot of cultural differences, and people begin to criticize. Why is he doing that? What's happening there? And I just say, why don't you just ask yourself the question, why would that be a good idea? How could that be a good thing? Not that you have to agree with that person, but there's always another side. So how could that be a good thing? You don't have to, you can still go away saying that's a horrible thing, but at least explore it in your own mind and see where that takes you. So
Do we have a right to make a judgment until we have heard that?
Exactly. You
that
haven't
other
walked
side
in their
out and
shoes.
see, what are those needs?
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
look around at friends and I go, what do they need? Can I acknowledge what they're needing? Can I give them with whatever it is in a small way with a few words?
Yeah.
So it's
Yeah.
wonderful to build bridges like that. So
Wow.
Yes.
yeah.
Thank you, Leslie.
Yes.
It continues to be always so much fun having a relationship with you, whether it's from Egypt to where we're at. Yeah.
And as we go through the panoply of gods and goddesses and postures that they represent, we appreciate the ones that you've introduced us to that maybe we had overlooked. And I remember a particular Sekhmet one.
Oh, yeah.
And
Yes.
so it's been fun to dance with you, Leslie, as well,
Yeah.
in this work
Thank
and in
you.
your work.
Yes.
All right.
And
So-
thank you for the work you're doing. I have learned a lot here and made friends. So that's a beautiful experience as well. Yeah.
Yeah.
And Keren, same with you. Thank you so much for being here today and what you contribute. And we look forward to hearing more of your work and all of that. So very exciting.
Do you have some final words to share with us, Keren, for today?
Yeah, I was thinking about what's the juiciest thing that I could say at the end of this. And I talked a little bit about this with Leslie a couple days ago, but I think, at the end of the day, if men and women both really truly could remember, and we can, and we will remember women's mysteries, the secrets that are to be unlocked there, and bring them into our body, I think that we can become who we've been waiting for. If you go back and look at sort of how this all kind of got messed up, is the best way to say it. It's really because we took our power and we said, oh, we don't have that power, right? But
Gave it away.
goddess is an embodied power.
Mhm.
Everything else is out here. And we've started to fear death. So the women's mysteries is about remembering the cycles and that we actually know how to do this. We can be reborn again and again and again. Once we don't fear death, we can't be controlled by powers that don't have our best interests at heart. And so then we become, the ones that we're waiting for, and we can move forward into the world that we've always wanted. So I would leave you with that.
Well, we can also control our entrance and our exit. And one of the topics we have coming up is let's rethink our own burial practices. Let's think how we're going to give back our bodies to Mother Earth so it can be taken up in a tree or the water or the air. Let's not fear the death, knowing that the promise of rebirth is right around the corner, and that there's the eternal wisdoms, the eternal promise that we can participate in as well. I appreciate that. And I would say everyone has equal access to the divine mysteries, male, female, and the in-between, the combination of the two. They're there to draw on. They're there to sustain us. It's proven so useful to our ancestors. It's available for us today as well.
So it's
These
not just the
invisible
divine,
realms
not just
and
the-
their access roads. Go ahead.
I'm sorry to talk over you.
Yeah.
It's not just a divine feminine, and it's not just a divine masculine, it's a divine human. And maybe that's the thing. Maybe
Divine
that's-
life.
yeah.
Yeah, life force.
You're right.
The netters. I like that definition. Nature. We are nature. We're a product of nature. She
Yes.
runs through us. And
Well, I'm
it's-
gonna
yeah, go ahead.
thank you all so
Yeah.
much. I'm gonna ask everybody to unmute themselves and say goodbye to these great presenters who really made us do some thinking today, to open ourselves up to
And bravely, I must say.
and
Thank
embrace
you.
it.
Yeah.
So speak up and say thank you.
Bye
Thank
bye.
you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.